In late 2014, I received an email from Omar Khalif, who is the curator at the WhiteChapel Gallery, and he had asked me if I was interested in collaborating with them to put on a show in London. Of course, I was very excited because WhiteChapel Gallery is one of the most prestigious museums in the world. But I had no idea about the scale of the exhibition that Omar had in mind. We were always, in the last 5 years, working on exhibitions that were between 15 and 25 pieces in an exhibition. But Omar was thinking big. Omar was thinking 100. Omar was thinking not only 100 artworks, but 100 years. So the scale of the exhibition is unprecedented. This has never happened before in the history of Western institutions borrowing art from the Middle East, showcasing Arab artwork not only in an isolated environment, but actually showcasing these works in context, showing that there is a build-up. There was abstract art, there was artworks that depicted Cubist or Expressionist or any other movement that you can imagine is available in the Arab world. The Articulate Cockerel is a piece by Iraqi artist Shakir Hassan Al-Saeed, dating back from the early 1950s. Shakir Hassan was a very important Sufi Iraqi artist. He was also a scholar, a professor, taught and inspired a generation of Iraqi artists, and he was the founder of a movement called the One Dimension, which is a Sufi-inspired movement that tries to capture this space between between the human race and between God, and so this work actually dates back to before he developed the One Dimension. I was always interested in art ever since I was young. In fact, we studied some of the political artworks when I was studying history in high school. And when I went to France, I had in the 1990s to study in university. And I would spend my time in Musée d'Orsay, the Louvre, and other major museums, just walking around, really not understanding everything because I was ultimately a business student, but I just enjoyed being surrounded by this art, especially the historic work. So I thought to myself when I graduated, do we have anything similar in the Middle East? Do we have artworks that are also political? Do we have works that are expressive of movements and histories and politics within the Arab world? And when I started researching, there was very little information out there. Initially, the Arab world is very much an oral society. So people memorized poetry, and nomadic tribes moved around the Arabian Peninsula and all the way to Egypt and parts of the Levant. And so they carried their culture with them. The Europeans introduced, for example, the printing press before the Arabs, so that changed. The mission of Barjeel really is to develop a collection that is accessible to the public, that is of relative importance, and that can further an understanding around cultures, and especially around the Middle East and the Arab world. The main goal is to preserve these works, save these works, because so much has happened in the last 5 years to the Middle East. A lot of cultural treasures were destroyed. Temples and churches and monasteries and even mosques and antiques have all been lost. And so art is one of these treasures that we have to safeguard. We're only 5 years old. We started in 2010, now it's 2015. We have loaned to 30 institutions around the world. I feel like, yes, it's been only 5 years, but I'm quite satisfied with where we've arrived. And now we have two major exhibitions. We're talking about the autumn of 2015, two major exhibitions, one at the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto in Canada, and one at the WhiteChapel Gallery in London. The notion of Arab art is quite problematic because the Arab world is not a single ethnic group. Within the Arab world, you have at least a dozen ethnicities. You have African Arabs, Armenian Arabs, you have Baluch, you have Jewish Arabs, you have Kurdish Arabs, Turkmen Arabs, Berber Arabs, and so on and so forth. So the notion of Arab art is not an easy notion to grapple with. However, having said that, there is a unifying streak, there is a unifying element between these artists whose mother tongue might either be Arabic or their functioning tongue, their lingua franca, is Arabic, wherever they lived. They are united by common histories, common geography, by politics, by cultural events and social events. So whether you're talking about late 19th century European conquest, all the way to the occupation of Palestine and the Arab Spring, all these are events that resonate between artists. You see that artists create works that are in response to these seismic events that have affected the Arab world. Many of the artists, because they were working under challenging political circumstances, were hesitant to give interviews to publications. Unfortunately, many of the TV stations that recorded interviews with Arab artists did not save these interviews, and a lot of the newspaper interviews were censored heavily. So sometimes we find that the very best source for information about an artist is interviewing his or her friends, because they would talk to their friends about the idea behind this work and what they really feel without censure, and at least we can decipher what these artworks are about. Most of the 20th century art by Arab artists, or a large segment of it, was inspired by political events. So when a person views artworks by Arab artists, it is really essential that they read about the era in which this artist was painting this work, whether there was political upheaval, whether it was done under occupation, whether it was done post-colonial withdrawal from the country. Mohammed Isiakham was one of the most important Algerian artists. He was active during the French colonialism of Algeria. This work, although undated, we assume to be somewhere around the 1960s, is one of his most important works. It depicts an older woman with one of her hands covered and standing by a wall with a lot of graffiti. And it's important to keep in mind that this graffiti is very political. One of the three-letter abbreviations is the Front Libération Nationale, which is the Algerian counter-colonial movement that is still in power today, almost over 50 years after Algeria gained its independence. So Mohammed Isiakham belonged to the Algerian Berber community, and he became a very important artist whose work appeared on stamps as well as on giant murals in the airport and the streets. So he almost became one of the national artists of Algeria post-independence. Many of the young artists in the Arab world operate under environments that are very challenging. Many of them work in police states. Sometimes there are civil wars. Sometimes there are threats by conservative elements in society. And so artists have to be very creative. Unlike in the West, when everything's so allowed and everything's so open, artists have to hide messages in their artworks. And we see this. I won't name the artists just to make sure that we safeguard their identity. But we have, for example, artists that create artworks that have icons. Within the faces that they paint important figures that have challenged the regimes. But when you look at the work, you don't understand it at face value. You really need to dig in and read about the work and about the artist. So these are some of the most exciting artists for me. For instance, there is a piece by Iraqi artist Kadhim Haidar, or the Epic of the Martyr. This work dates back to 1965. According to scholars, this work depicts the martyrdom of Imam Hussein bin Ali. But it's important to understand in what context this artwork was painted. In the 1960s was just shortly after a political upheaval in Iraq. There was a coup d'etat, the monarchy was overthrown, there was a tension in the country, and there was also a number of political assassinations and another coup attempt in the early 60s. So this artist was trying to use the incident of Imam Hussein bin Ali to reflect on contemporary circumstances. So it has religious undertones, but it very much is a political artwork dating back from half a century. Today, of course, with the internet, this is all changed because artists can create blogs, they can record videos, they can record podcasts, we can send them emails. So things have really changed dramatically over the last decade in the Arab world.